Okay, Deacon Online. We're in your little studio worlds here. Just as a quick intro to yourself, and we'll get into what we want to do around these interview sessions. As an introduction, you're a director, you're a world builder, you're a community organizer. When someone outside this world that is we are VR and world building, when they ask you what you do, what do you tell them?
Oh, geez, a bit of everything, really. I mean, world building in VRChat is a big part of it. Um, Also, working in game engines, Unity and Unreal, and that opens up a lot of other avenues. So, this virtual production work, cinematics. Yeah. So the way I categorize it is VR, AR, and 3D. And 3D sort of encompasses a lot of different things.
Okay, and what was the moment or the project? I mean, we're probably going back a few years now when you knew XR was the medium you wanted to build your work around. I mean, what was the clicking point there for
Ooh, that's such a good question. I think for me, it was like the Google Cardboard. I got a Google Cardboard about maybe 10 years ago, and I put my phone in it, and I went and did this game where you sort of a bird flying between islands, and I thought, man, this is crazy. This is gonna change gaming. This is gonna change media and entertainment. This is a really big deal. And the Google Cardboard made it really accessible. So for me, that like something clicked, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of potential here. Um, and I've spent the best part of a decade trying to figure out how best to use that potential and tap into it.
you? Yeah, I think Google Cardboard was pretty much my entry point there as well. What year was this? We're probably in like 2017-ish, 2016, 2017-ish from my side. That's when I was like, oh, but mind you, even when I was first saw it, I was somewhat familiar with it then even, but not as a functional application, like not as something that could be used as you're holding it and you can actually view it. So yeah, I guess it's about a decade or so ago that this kind of stuff really started making some sort of inroads in the sort of the public domain.
Yeah, and it wasn't soon after that that the Oculus Go came out, and Oculus itself got bought out by Facebook, and then the Meta Quest rollout. So, like to Facebook's credit, they certainly brought VR into the home, although they probably took a lot of
Yeah.
inspiration from Google, who did the same thing with the cardboard.
No, no, exactly. And I think my intros was also as a little more on the media front and the journalism front, in the sense that everyone was saying this would be the next sort of space of storytelling and immersion and really sort of empathizing with your subject in terms of how to tell a story within a journalism context. That hasn't really taken off, although there are some good examples of things that did make an impact, but I always found them a little bit clumsy, a little bit impractical, really, to really get a story across. It was kind of, I wouldn't say it was gimmicky. It wasn't gimmicky in this. It was really good executions, and it was really good intent. But it was kind of in a space where I was like, oh, it kind of ticks the box for me in the sense that you're trying to tell a really good real world story, but at the same time there's a really nice technical layer involved that interested me, like the hardware and the software and the sort of the execution, how it gets published, and how that mechanism work always interested me a little bit. So I guess that was my inroads a little bit as well. And again, that was cardboard. I can't remember now what the particular experience was, but yeah, that was my entry point as well.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You're right about the novelty of it. It definitely has. I mean, there's so many different applications for it, so novelty plays a big role in it. But I think it avoids being gimmicky because there is a lot of depth to it. When people ask what's the most important part of VR, or like why is it a thing at all, it's because it's a technology that lets you step into the media, which is kind of wildly different from other ways to do things. Um, Different in that it can give you a different experience, like a different human experience, which is crazy. Um, So yeah, I could see why people might think of it as gimmicky, but like there's a lot more to it than that, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, particularly this social aspect, the fact that we're sitting in worlds, and we're looking at each other. The technology is not where I would like it to be. I mean, my personal avatar. I mean, your avatar is far better than mine, but you know, I would like to be in a space where we're almost seeing you're in world, but you're seeing a very good representation of the individual, their eye movements, their body movements, and I think that the technology is getting there. Particularly with the Quest 3, we're in the space where you're getting these kind of like almost real world interaction. That's a space I really like, and that's something that VRChat introduced me to a little bit. And you know, when I attended my first party in VRChat. It was just like, oh wow, this is incredible. These aren't I'm not in a game world in the sense that these are NPCs and I'm and kind of just knocking about a world. These are actual individuals, and you can kind of listen on people's conversations. You feel the same sort of sense of presence. You're in a space where you know you don't want to dance too close to someone, or if you're not part of a conversation, still you feel the same sort of social um, cues, you know, in the sense that oh, if you're not part of the conversation, you can't just stand there, you know. And that was interesting for me, and that part I really liked, and I think that being able to meet people from all parts of different around the world for me was a really nice experience from the social aspect of VR, where outside of just the experiences. We can get into experiences a little bit, but the social aspect for me was, as someone that isn't overly social. I mean, I like people, I like being out, but it was new, it was fresh for me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and the you know, just to bring it back to avatars, there's an interesting aspect of representation as well. You know, you sure you can represent yourself as you are in reality, but you can take it further if you want. You know, there's a very artistic side to it. Or how do you want to identify as something that flies around and sort of is minute and stays in the background? Because there's social implications to that as well. There's social implications to switching genders and social implications to so like that aspect of identity is like really ingrained in the VR experience. But again, it's not just a surface veneer thing. Or like you know, you're not just picking a character. It's a lot more deep than that. It's like who do you feel like you want to be today? Who do you feel like you want to? How do you want to express yourself today? And for a lot of folks it's like a very on it's a long-term journey of self-exploration, um which yeah, although you know I wouldn't I don't like to knock NPCs. You know, I tend to put a lot of them in my worlds to make them feel a little bit busier and a little bit more fuller, partly because like in the real world there will often be a lot of different people around that you're not directly interacting with. They're there, but you haven't met them and you might not speak to them that day. So like I try and reflect that and give that same impression as well.
100%. So let's talk about We Are VR as a community a little bit. Maybe I've got I've got some views on it and sort of my own entry into it. I don't even know if it was called We Are VR back then. I'm referring to about 2018-ish or so. Um, but maybe you can just tell us a little bit about your involvement there, how it got started, what was the whole genesis of that?
Sure. So when I wanted to get started in VR and AR, um, I the first thing I wanted to do is get in touch with people who were already working in the industry. So I looked online and I looked for meetups and for events and other creators, and I found that there was not much of a formalized community. There were people working in the industry, but they were sort of joining the game dev meetups, or they were joining, techie coder meetups, but there was no community for VR and AR interested people. So, I asked around, and they said, and the folks who were working in the industry said it's a good idea. We should organize it. So we secured the Tomorrow Gallery space in Rosebank in Johannesburg, and hosted our first meetup. Got a basically sort of like a TED talk style meetup where we had one or two speakers, and then the rest of the time was just sort of hanging out and just chatting and getting to know people and sharing ideas. But I think it was important to also showcase what people were doing to serve as inspiration for other creators. Yeah, and that was 2018 we formalized the idea, and then 2019 we started having the meetups. Yeah, until now.
And who else was involved in that? You were a co-founder, founder, or how did what was the ecosystem there?
Yeah, there've been a lot of people who have helped over the years. The first person I chatted to was Ulrico Gretschkombo from Habitat XR now. It was Deep VR back then. Um, he was the one who introduced me to Anne Roberts, who ran the Tomorrow Gallery in Rosebank. So she was a huge help. Deliso Ngoma, the host and MC, also was on board from early on. He's always been focused on hardware, but he's also a great personality and a great guy. So he was a natural fit for being the MC. The guys from Eden Labs, Gareth and Rick, were super helpful in introducing me to and suggesting different speakers. Um, yeah, so many. Tando has done the music for the last two seasons. Uh, Lex Neville has been helping out with audio, as well as Sean Davenport, and Bouzoué has helped out with organizing as well. And it's just over the years, so many people have volunteered and chipped in. It's been a really nice experience, a real team effort.
No, sounds good. I mean, here we are, 2026. What's that? 8 years later, officially speaking. Where do you see it now? Like philosophically, community based. How are you feeling about the community? How are you thinking about it?
It's interesting. I think over the years there's a lot of ups and downs. Kind of, I think it's part of the technology. Like AR and VR is very tethered to the hardware, and the hardware comes in waves. There'll be a new release of a new headset, and everybody gets really excited and gets their hands dirty with that headset. And then once that sort of hype dies down a little bit, people move on. Some people move on to other things, and some hardware doesn't really stand the test of time. So there's always been waves. I see it as like waves. Um, Recently, with there's been a lot of news about Meta sort of scaling back their VR operations, although they're still working on it, more than anybody. They're throwing more dollars at it than any other company in the world. So I don't think they've abandoned it, but with them scaling back their efforts and redirecting a little bit more towards AI, there has been a bit of a cool down. But I think the thing that this industry has going for it is there are just so many innovators on the software side and the hardware side that it really doesn't take long for a new wave of enthusiasm to hit. I mean, I think this year, the thing that a lot of people are looking forward to is the new Valve headset, which should be a nice high-end gaming friendly PC VR headset, which I think is, we've been looking forward to it for a long time. And I think that'll rejuvenate the spirits of the software developers and the hardware distributors. So yeah, ups and downs, I think, but it's kind of always been that way in my experience.
Um, so you mentioned quite a few names just now, and I know these names, and a lot of the guys are local guys. Um, and I think it might be a good time to just talk about I, just a quick piece of context for myself in the sense that it's taken me a while to figure out my own involvement. I mean, I've been dipping in and out since 2018, but I'm not a creative technologist in that sort of sense. I'm a very good end user. I love the experiences. Um, and it's kind of something that's very niche. It didn't apply. I couldn't apply my job to it as a journalist or as a publisher. Um, and I struggled to find a space for it. And what I really always wanted to do, and I've spilled into it a little bit in terms of my other sort of show execution on the angle. We've had a couple of you guys on the show there. Um, but I've always wanted to be in a space where we're really exploring the innovators within this ecosystem, whether it's software, hardware, experiences. I mean, there's so much great work being done and guys doing the most amazing innovative space, whether it's world building, whether it's building broader experiences that tie into larger world issues like the Habitat XR guys are doing, Um, and you know, for somewhere along the line, you and I started chatting about it, and weirdly enough, you and I only met relatively recently, even though we've kind of been in the same circles for a little bit of time. And I just think it was such a nice connection in the sense that okay, we're both interested in covering the scene, or I'm not even thinking about in terms of covering it from a news perspective. I'm just really interested in the individuals, their backgrounds, what are they working on, how they're seeing the work they're doing, how they're applying it. And obviously, I'm very interested in the practical applications of it from whether it's a business perspective, the sustainability perspective. How are you thinking about what we want to do around this particular show and how we might want to, what we might want to get out of it, not or apply to it to the bigger ecosystem.
I think there are a lot of lessons that we can teach each other, people who are using these technologies. It's a very exploratory space, and everybody's trying to take it from a different angle. So, when it comes to the meetups, we always tried to spotlight a person in their project because it was always something completely different. So I think, it's important to archive and document and, share what people are working on, because something that works for me might work for somebody else, or something that's working for somebody else might work for me. And that's kind of very much in the spirit of the community, I think. So yeah, I think it's super important to um, try and archive. I mean, I see it as an archive. I know maybe it's a bit of it's not the perfect word for it, but to, document what everybody's up to and what's worked and what hasn't worked, and, expose everybody else to the interesting work that's going on. Yeah, it's a very artistic space as well. So it's not just technology focused. There are filmmakers trying to using the medium to tell stories, and there are activists using the medium to make real world impact. So I think while we're all trying to figure out, how best to apply this technology, sharing our stories is a big and important part of that.
I mean, I always reference Kent Bai and his show Voices of VR. That's been going on for a long time, and he's been very influential in me, just in terms of also introducing to me the huge plethora of of things going on out there. And he takes a similar approach in terms of archiving. He refers to it as an audio archive. I'm much more of a visual person in the sense that I'm very interested in the individual, but I want to see their creations. I want to have the access to the worlds, and it's not just worlds as well. I just want to have access to their experiences, their executions. There's a gathering of different kinds of media that come along with these kind of individuals and what they're doing. And with my own multimedia background, I'm always very interested in how do we capture all of that? How do we kind of get the whole picture? Um, my own intentions here would be uh, I take archive quite seriously in my own work as well, in the sense that I want to be in a space, even if the world isn't active or the experience isn't active. There's a particular problem in XR experiences that they kind of fall off the radar once they've had their launch, once they've had their sort of run on the circuit, as it were. They kind of disappear, and often they disappear off servers in the sense that you cannot find them again. They don't exist anymore, and I think that's such a waste. And I would love to be in a space where there's only so much we can do in the sense of preserving that. I mean, a lot of these worlds exist on other servers within other platforms, sometimes behind walled gardens. Um, but while they exist, you want to be able to see them, you want to be able to experience them, hear them, have the individual that made them, whether it's real life interview, whether it's in worlds, it doesn't matter to me. Um, that's for me is a really important part of this archiving process. And I would add that being down here in the southern tip of Africa, um, I think I've mentioned this before, and I could be completely wrong, but it's almost like there's a disproportionate number of individuals in this part of the world that are doing really interesting work, uh, more so than the European or North American counterparts. Um, that that deserve to be recognized, and they appear. It's not like they're unknown in the circles. They are known, but they're not known here. Like South Africans don't understand, don't know that there's so many individuals here doing international work. So yeah, I think this would be an important show to try and bring that out.
Yeah, yeah, we've definitely got a sort of this subculture that we've built in South Africa of, trying to pioneer this new technology. Although I think the Europeans and the Americans and the Asians might fight you, because there's a lot going on there as well. But we're definitely trying to stake our claim. It's kind of like the art industry, I think. You have artists all around the world, but there are some sort of niches and cliques in certain parts of the world where they sort of help each other out, and it sort of thrives and it flourishes on its own. We're definitely trying to build that here, no doubt.
Do you think, just for ease of reference, I'm going to call everyone producers, XR producers, and what they're involved with. Do you think that, and again, this is a gut feeling for myself, not purely gut, but in the sense that also there does seem to be a somewhat of a cultural shift in the world, in the sense that they are starting to look at less less exposed cultural expressions, whether it's Africa, whether it's Asian. That's certainly making a little more of a splash. And part of my reference for that is, when you go to things like the G20 or you go to things like Davos, for example, and they start, there's a lot of African cultural expression there, in a sense of like the music or the kind of stuff they play or the kind of aesthetics they have at those kind of meetings these days. It's becoming much broader, and I would almost dare to say that it's a bit cheesy, and I but it's almost like the rise of this continent, or this part of this region of the continent. The time is ripe. Like, I think we're in a space where culturally we're kind of making enough of a footprint that we're going to start seeing much more investment, much more sort of studios, much more of a sort of allowance for startups, venture capital coming into this space to build these kind of experiences that have much broader applications in the world. That's my gut feel, but also that gut feels, it's informed a little bit from what I see, little hints here and there around the broader cultural landscape.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
are
There's
your
a
views there?
there's a funny contradiction there, I think, because on the one hand, you know, we want to do business, we want to make money, we want to, be able to survive by creating this stuff. Um, so there's like a sort of business necessities, and that kind of dictates a lot of strategy sometimes. Dictates what kind of markets you go to, dictates what kind of products you produce, dictates how you promote it and sell it. So there's a very businessy side to it, which kind of favors the sort of Western, English speaking market, do the whole hero's journey arc storytelling, and like, so that really constricts creativity. But then on the other hand, like you said, there's a lot of free expression, and that stuff is not so commercial. That stuff's a little bit more creative and a little bit more out there. And it's funny to see these two like worldviews clash, the sort of business versus the artistic side of it, and they interplay as well. Sometimes good art does get promoted well, and it ends up being a good product as well as an impactful experience. So it's funny to see these two like forces at play, I think. um, I don't know. I guess it's up to each person to figure out where they fit on that spectrum, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Just bringing back to this introduction to this show. Um, what would you like to see happen? I mean, what do we want to do here? Is it for my particular space, because we're meeting in world? I think of this. We're going to start with doing a lot of the local guys that we have immediate access to, we know personally, which I think is a good starting point. Um, I would like to see this expand into like a really, just a really interesting show that just showcases some of the most innovative work going on in media, in entertainment, and gaming, with of course an XR bend. Um, what are your views? What do you want to see? What do you want to see out of this? And like, and to be fair, it's not like I mean, I'm committed. I think you are too. I mean, clearly, you've just you've built out. You've been in it for a few years. You've built out the community pretty much on your ace. you know, it's going to be a bit of a road, but it's going to be rewarding. And if we document properly, if we archive properly, we keep this accessible. I think we could make some splashes. I think we could make a really nice, valuable offering to individuals wanting to understand the space a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah. I I think since VRChat became available on Android phones and iOS, as well as desktop, it means that now you don't necessarily need a VR headset to join the VRChat world so that you can share your work. So I think that accessibility breakthrough has only come through pretty recently, which is great. I think it's super, you know. So I feel like it's a good time to give it a bash, see how it goes. Try and get that archive, flesh out that archive more. Um, chat to more interesting people, expose their work. Yeah, I feel like it's necessary, and it's definitely worth a shot. I think. Um, I think consistency is going to be
How would you,
important for us. To keep rolling them out every week. Just get that sort of momentum going. I think that'll be important, though.
how would you think? What would you consider our metrics of success here? It's not like it's not something that's gonna, and I've been working in these kind of shows for not VR per se, but I've been building a lot of podcast shows, a lot of video executions in my previous work in my professional life. um, I know this isn't going to break the internet. It's not like we're going to be getting millions of views per show. We're not the next Modern Wisdom or Diary of a CEO or something like that, but I would like to be in a space where we're producing something as professional and as valuable, and kind of really um, building something that does actually start spilling over into like a larger discourse outside of this particular XR space. Um, and part of the reason I know you're quite technical. I understand technicals quite well in the sense that I can talk about them, but I can't go. There's a certain level I can't go into in the sense that you guys can talk about Unity and the ins and outs of Unity and the difficult spaces around there. And there's in the different WhatsApp chats, there's guys dealing with really interesting technical problems and they're solving them. I'm not in that space. You can talk about that space, I think, a little bit better. But I think my benefit would be I'm always going to be want to pull it back a little bit outside of that, going too deep into that world and saying, what's the practical application here? How are we thinking about it? Is it something that, whether it's entertainment, whether it's some sort of industrial application, uh, I'm always going to bring it back. I always want to introduce this world to like a bigger audience in the sense that, and try and make them do it in a way that they understand it as well as possible. So I guess my metric for success wouldn't necessarily be huge number of views. It would be its usefulness and value within an ecosystem that spills outside of the XR community. That would be what I'm thinking about.
Mine would be gigabytes. The amount of content that we can create, like the amount of interviews that we can do. I think the more the better. Um, and I don't want to rush it, but I do think that if we can try and hear from as many different people as possible, I think that would be a real big win. I agree. I don't think views is the right way to count it. Um, just to touch on your point that you made about like the technicalities of it all, I even though I spend a lot of time behind my PC trying to figure out how am I going to solve this bug, or what's the right tool for the job, I think it's important to bring it back to reality, bring it back to like, why does this thing matter? Why should people care? What's the point of this thing? There's some really obvious questions that technical folks like to gloss over, but I think we should really like remind everybody about the important things. How does this thing, like, how does solution X actually change things? Like, who is it intended to help? How is it going to help them? How do we know that it helps them? I think those questions are really important. So I appreciate the non-technical side of it very much.
Yeah, 100%. And plus, I mean, even for myself, I've always gotten a kick out of being like like an in-world journalist. I forget his name at the time. There was do you remember Second Life?
Oh yeah, yeah.
there's a guy that he was basically like the in-world resident journalist for Second Life, and he had like a really active blog, and he was really informed. Um, I'll remember his name is in a bit, but anyway, he's still kind of active actually, and I've always gotten a kick out of that in the sense that oh, that was always so interesting to me. Like he was uncovering so many interesting communities in that space, people doing interesting work, people building really interesting businesses. And he was like, that was very much in world. That was before, I think the smartphone kind of killed Second Life for the most part. They didn't adapt to it. But for me, that was a space where I was first exploring, and I was like, this is for me the most amazing thing I've ever explored. And this must have been, what was this? This was like early 2000s, man. This was 2003-ish, four, when I was like really trying to lean into it. I remember I couldn't even spend that much time on it because I couldn't afford the data. It was like every time a session would be like a gigabyte, and I would only have like be able to afford like a gigabyte or two, a month at that point. So I couldn't even spend that much time in there. Obviously, that has changed, thankfully. We're all on uncapped fiber connections now. But for me, that was always a kick in the sense of how do I explore this? What's my role here? I found that the individuals doing the most interesting work, and that just deserved, as from a cultural perspective. Never mind the technicalities and what they're building and how they could build it. The cultural perspective of that was always of great interest to me, and I think there's this particular region we're in, and the number of people that are involved, and the great executions that are going on out there, whether it's Venice Biennale, the immersive stuff. Um, I think it's just worth covering. This is worth exploring, worth chatting to the individuals, and having a really nice sort of exploration of the space.
Yeah, I think that's a good indication of how good a platform is how many secondary industries does it impact? How many does it spin up? Like social media started off as a place where you could have a profile page, and now people are running businesses, and there is consulting and advising, and there are photographers, and like a lot of like auxiliary businesses spun out of it. And I think you're seeing a similar thing in VRChat now. There are people who focus on avatars, there are people who focus on worlds, there are people who focus on games. The VTuber phenomenon of people, doing, like you said, sharing their opinions and becoming sort of virtual influencers. It's a I think it's a good barometer, or like a good indication of how well the platform's doing. And I suspect VRChat was quite influenced by Second Life, if you go back far enough. I don't know that for a fact, but I have a hunch.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. Um, okay, well, from my side, I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm looking forward to just carving out the space and figuring out where it goes, and just making up some good content. I agree with you on the gigabytes as well. I think the more we do, the more consistency and just the deeper explorations we go, the better it's going to be for everyone.
Yeah, maybe we should like physically represent each gig of video footage, and we'll put it in the corner, and then after 6 months, have a look at this big pile of blocks in the corner that each represent a gig of data that we've recorded.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Cool, man. Well, I'm glad we've connected.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for also your passion and interest in this. Um, yeah, it's super inspiring.